From Breitbart, here's the news. HHS defunds EcoHealth Dr. Peter Daszak for facilitating dangerous Wuhan gain-of-function research. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has cut off all funding and formally debarred EcoHealth Alliance Incorporation and its former president, Dr. Peter Daszak, after finding evidence that it facilitated gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China, without proper oversight and violated statutes in its National Institutes of Health grant. Evidence was gathered over an 8-month investigation by the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, the Committee on Oversight Government Reform said in a Friday news release. A letter from HHS states that a 5-year period of debarment for Dr. Daszak is necessary to protect the federal government's business interests and confirms that EcoHealth terminated his employment on January 6 of this year. Now they're doing this. One day before Donald Trump gets inaugurated into office. A May 2024 interim report from the Coronavirus Subcommittee revealed serious systemic weaknesses within NIH and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, that enabled Daszak to fund dangerous gain-of-function research with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, with a multi-million-dollar federal grant. Then Subcommittee Chair Brad Wenstrup accused the British doctor of having blatant contempt for the American people, calling it reprehensible. Okay, so 2020, February, we got hit with the coronavirus pandemic. This was something that I was aware of while I was going to CDL school. And I noticed that back in, I think it was September or October, there was a YouTube channel member, Memology 101, or Memology 102, depending on what happened to his channel. He was getting video reports of the coronavirus attacking the citizens of China, where they were dropping on the floor. And he was giving this information out as he was getting it from whatever sources that this guy ended up doing. He actually was the one that broke the story, in my opinion, because he was the first one that I noticed that was doing something about it. And he ended up, it ended up getting to our shores here, and our government made the necessary, how should I say, decisions it needed to make because we didn't have much knowledge of what was going on with this virus at the time. The only thing that we knew was that it was killing people, and we needed to try to stop it as best as we could. Throughout a multitude of different ideas, our leader at the Health and Human Services Institute, or basically the guy that's in charge of the CDC, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Anthony Fauci was the one to go ahead and handle the coronavirus. He's also famously known for also handling the AIDS virus as it attacked the American populace and the world back in the mid-'80s to disastrous effects. Now, it says here, Eco Alliance President Dr. Peter Daszak is not a good steward of U.S. taxpayer dollars and should never again receive funding from the U.S. taxpayer. Dr. Daszak and his organization conducted dangerous gain-of-function research at the WIV, willfully violated the terms of a multi-million-dollar NIH grant, and placed U.S. national security at risk. No, he didn't just do that. The dumb son of a bitch murdered millions of people across the world. This blatant contempt for the American people is reprehensible. It is imperative to establish higher standards of oversight at the NIH. The select subcommittee's detailed and comprehensive report today holds Dr. Disack and EcoHealth Alliance accountable and sheds light on severe shortcomings in our public health systems. On top of disbarment, the interim report also recommended that the Disack be criminally investigated. And I can't agree with that more, along with criminally investigating Dr. Fauci, criminally investigating every single solitary person who ended up pushing after we started to get knowledge of what this virus was. I mean, in the first few weeks, there was panic, and I totally understand that. All right, it's totally understandable when you don't know what you're dealing with. But as we were trying to have both our experts in the NIH and the CDC try to come up with ideas, we also have experts out in the independent private markets who are doing the same thing and trying to come up with some type of cure, some type of treatment, anything that they could do, because that's what doctors do. Now, the findings that these gentlemen were coming up with in the private sector were vastly contradicting what the government health experts were saying. And that's really actually not surprising, considering that government does nothing but a bunch of fuck-ups here and there. You hire the lowest common denominator for the guy that's going to go ahead and be a yes man to whatever political party is there at the time, because usually when the CDC has to get involved and it's the government, it's because a politician wants to make sure he doesn't look bad. And that makes it look like he's doing something for the American people. Some of it ends up being slimy. Some of it ends up looking noble. In the case of Donald Trump, we know that he's not a doctor, and he just wanted to do the best that he possibly could. And he put our government to task with a mission to defeat this virus, and that's commendable. All right, whether you want to go ahead and say that how Donald Trump had handled things, none of you could have ever conceived what needed to be done. You just looked at the experts that were there in your corner, and you relied upon the information that they have. Now, we have found out, basically, afterwards, right? Because what Americans love to do is we love to question things. We love to go ahead and break things down and analyze them. And one of the things that we want to do is, where the fuck did this virus come from? I was listening to Dr. Michael Savage's show, because he's a doctor. He's a doctor. He has his doctorates in nutrition, and also I also believe he also has it a little bit in virology. I'm not using the exact terms. I'm not obviously looking at his webpage. Don't take this as the fucking gospel from a madman. All right? I'm just going off of what's off the top of my head, because that's what I do for my videos. I hit record, I spit it out exactly as it comes off at the top of my head, and that's it. If I can go ahead and bring it up, I will. If not, oh well. But there's nothing, I'm not going to do that, because I already got too much shit to go ahead and wrap into this story to begin with. But one of the things that we noticed was that Dr. Michael Savage had said that he observed reports that showed that elements of this virus seemed not like nature would intended. It seemed like some of the pieces of the virus itself, because you got the virus, and it has all of its little parts and what have you, which make up the virus. And he was saying some of these look like they were manufactured to do that. Now, why would Michael Savage say such a thing? Is because he's studied these things, so he would know. I would trust his opinion from his research off the basic fact that he knows what he's talking about. He went to school for it, and he's saying this thing looks a little goddamn creepy, and I'm calling a little bit of bullshit. It doesn't look like nature made these mutations to this virus. It looks like gain-of-function research. He was the first person that I heard say something like that. Then Joe Rogan had another guy on. I can't think of the guy's name, but I believe he was a professor at Evergreen or Everwood, one of those ridiculous fucking colleges that are up there. And I noticed that he said the same thing. So now we have two experts who have knowledge in this field, apart from the government, saying something that the government is keeping their mouth shut about. Every time we tried to go ahead and bring up these issues to the National Institute for Health and the CDC, it's not that they were coming out at first and saying, no, it wasn't doing that. They were ignoring us. They weren't saying shit. Now, why they weren't saying anything? I think because they are bureaucrats over there, and they were waiting for permission from the higher echelons of our government on what they need to say. Like the CDC and the NIH, they're supposed to be the CDC and the NIH, the Centers for Disease Control, and the National Institute for Health. Why would they wait for permission on to make a statement when they are hired as the ones to go ahead and say something if something has to be said? No, they were waiting for permission to make a statement. And then when they mentioned their statement later on completely contradicted everything that people in the private sector were saying. On top of what they were saying in the private sector, they were telling these people, they were saying not only were these people were wrong, you shouldn't listen to them because they don't know any better, that they were stupid. And it was stupid for them to have the NIH and CDC's statement questioned. That's a little strange. All right, you got to come off that. It comes off a little strange when the government is saying something like that, when so many times in the past we have trusted the government agencies, the experts that they hire, for this correct information. And now it's like they started to failings to make sure. The question is why? Now, of course, us out here in the world, that's exactly what we started to ask ourselves. We started to go ahead and brainstorm. Brainstorming between intellectuals and people giving their opinions online. All of a sudden, now, something that we've been doing normally, that there's been nothing wrong with what we as the American people do when we receive this information and we process it and try to go ahead and come up with solutions because we care, because we love, because we want to see these problems solved, because that's what we do. That's what we do as a people. We look at our problems, we come up with the best solutions, and we attack them, and we defeat them. That's what we fucking do. That's why we're number one. That's why we're the best at what we do. But this time, the government was calling us conspiracy theorists and tossing us off. And on top of them calling us conspiracy theorists, all of a sudden, social media, Twitter at the time, Twatter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, and various other social media companies, they started shadow banning these experts' opinions and our opinions at the same time. Then they started banning these accounts and suspending these accounts for merely mentioning something that does not go directly in line with this, with what the government was saying. And it was so strange. It was so absolutely strange. I think back to that era in our time, and I'm completely taken aback. It felt like a dream world. It just didn't feel things didn't feel normal when our government was saying such. I mean, we know our government's a bunch of fuck ups. We know that, but this had gone far, far, far beyond the pale. And I'm sure there's many of you out there who would agree. You could say it in the comments. But it was so far beyond the pale that to look at these experts that we put so much trust in, and for them to just blatantly look like they're lying. It seemed to me like they were trying to hide something, and that's what we as Americans started to focus on. If the government was doing something like this, it means that they have something to hide. Now, they, at the same time, they called us conspiracy theorists. They called us crazy. They called us Looney Tunes for it. They banned us. People lost their jobs. They were... and it was just a gigantic mess. And so, at the time, Dr. Fauci was flip-flopping on things that needed to be said. First, in the beginning, he said, you don't need to wear a mask. You don't need the masks. And then he comes out and he said, yeah, then you need the masks. It was fucking crazy. It was absolutely insane. More than me. But it looked like the fucking guy was trying to hide something, and we were desperate for members of our government to start calling them out, and they didn't want to. And then after so long, they started to attack Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan was coming out and saying that he was taking alternative treatments for it, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Nobel Peace Prize winning medication that focuses on parasites. I think it was also single-handedly attributed to wiping out dengue fever, I think it was. Like I said, I don't know. I didn't look this up. I'm just going off of what's on top of my head. But Joe Rogan recovered from COVID, early COVID, in 3 days. He said it fucked him up. He felt like shit, but he was all right after about 3 days. And CNN started to go ahead and attack him for that, as well as other news organizations saying that he was eating horse paste and that he was crazy. Meanwhile, people are dropping dead across the world by the millions. Right? And these news organizations were celebrating it by keeping these, constantly, shoving this fear porn into our faces. And it was rather disturbing to watch. It was living in a dream world. All of a sudden, we didn't have a voice. We didn't have an outlet to go ahead and voice our opinions. And now, come sometime later, the House of Representatives came up with a subcommittee to start asking questions and start investigating. Rand Paul ended up getting on top of there. And who's Rand Paul? Rand Paul is a former doctor who became a senator. And he's a good doctor. And he started to he was looking at the information that was provided. He was getting pushback on his opinions, but unlike the doctors in the private sector, he was alone in government, and he had the ability to start investigations into this and start asking some of the hard questions. And he was directing his work at Dr. Anthony Fauci. When he had gotten hold of Anthony Fauci, we got some pretty disturbing answers from him, where first we were thinking, man, it sounds like the guy's got something he's hiding that he doesn't want to say. It all of a sudden became, this motherfucker's hiding something, and it looks like it could be criminal. I mean, this guy looks like he's scared. So the Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer of Kentucky celebrated the defunding and disbarment of EcoHealth and Disack in a Friday statement. Justice for the American people was served today. Bad actor EcoHealth Alliance and its corrupt former president, Dr. Peter Disack, was formally disbarred by HHS for using taxpayer funds to facilitate dangerous gain-of-function research in China, the Kentucky Republican said in the subcommittee's press release. Today's decision is not only a victory for the U.S. taxpayer, but also for American national security and the safety of citizens worldwide. So you disbarred him and you took his money away because he facilitated dangerous gain-of-function research. And the son of a bitch created a deadly virus that murdered people. All right, he murdered people. All right, this wasn't. He was just doing something, and whoops! It just so happened that this virus got created by accident, and people got sick. And yeah, that totally sucks. No, this guy created this behind everybody's back on purpose, under the orders of Dr. Anthony Fauci, and probably the CIA and DARPA. They couldn't do it here, so they had to go to a place where they weren't being watched. Where are those places that aren't being watched? Ukraine is one of them. Specifically a strange facility on Snake Island that has no strategic position for defense to be there. It more looks like they just want to make sure that nobody else, that it stays away from people. And then also in Wuhan, China, which of course, the Chinese government doesn't give a shit if they have a deadly virus lab right smack in the middle of a population where they could, if something fucks up, they could, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people could die. But then again, the Chinese government doesn't care if people die or not, so long as their party survives and stays in power. So here, from Reason, Free Minds and Markets, Anthony Fauci gives misleading, evasive answers about NIH-funded research at a Wuhan lab. At yesterday's congressional hearing, back on 6/3/2024, in a now infamous 2021 exchange with Senator Rand Paul, Anthony Fauci, the former longtime head of the NIAID and former chief medical advisor to the president, said that the National Institutes of Health, which oversees NIAID, has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We now know today that this is not true. A treasure trove of documents uncovered by congressional investigators and dogged investigative journalists, real journalists, ladies and gentlemen, not those fiddle fucks over at CNN, the Communist News Network, or MS completely a group of fuck-ups, NBC, has established that the NIAID was funding gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan lab via a grant to the scandal-plagued nonprofit EcoHealth Alliance, which the Biden administration just disbarred from receiving federal funding. These revelations lead to the inescapable conclusion that Fauci was being misleading at best and dishonest at worst about the NIH-funded research at Wuhan. Your fucking money The money that goes to the government so that we can have the experts at the CDC run things and give us proper information right up front. They took that fucking money and they were using it to create fucking bioweapons. And some dumb fuck eating dim sum and fucking Wuhan fucked up, got sick, and got out. Or the Chinese Communist Party, they released the virus on purpose. Or the virus was released accidentally through an accident, but the Chinese Communist Party, never letting a crisis go to waste, decided to keep their mouths shut, allow their own citizens in Wuhan and across their nation to get sick, spread this virus, drop dead in the middle of the streets, thanks to all of that information that they had, and end up making sure that this virus got to the United States while Donald Trump was president, to make sure that it would affect his ability to get reelected. I'm sure not only were the Chinese Communist Party thinking of this on their own at their think tanks, I also think that people here at the CIA who want war for money and oil for themselves, not us, but for them, I think either A, they were working alone in a standalone complex for the same, all towards the same goal, or quite possibly, considering that General Mark Milley personally called his direct counterpart of the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for China, and told them that if Donald Trump says he's declaring war on you, don't worry, we're not going to do anything. Maybe our military-industrial complex was working hand in hand with the Chinese Communist Party to get rid of Donald Trump and to stop our MAGA movement from making significant changes to how our government operates for the American people and how it operates across the world. These endless wars for oil, endless wars for Europe, and bowing to the whims and being the purse for kings and oligarchs that aren't even in this country, for gas and oil and materials that we will never get a deal on. We will never see a price drop for. All that oil that everyone was talking about in Iran, in Iraq, Afghanistan, we didn't see a goddamn drop of it. We went to war for 20 years and we didn't got shit. We got their heroin, but Fauci was lying. We knew he was hiding something. We didn't know exactly what. We could only speculate because it's been so long since this happened back in February 2020 that it's guaranteed that most of the evidence has already been destroyed. So they covered their ass. Here we are from Outkick. COVID came from gain-of-function research in the Wuhan lab, new information claims. Fauci supported gain-of-function research with the National Institutes of Health under his and Francis Collins' leadership, issuing years of grant money supporting risky science, and it might have helped create the COVID-19 pandemic in conjunction with incompetent practices at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. I'm not going to sit and say incompetent practices. I'm going to say purposefully. They did it on purpose. That's what I think. They released this virus on purpose. The FBI famously said with moderate confidence that they believed the virus had come from the lab. Somehow, per the journal, the other agencies who believed in a natural origin were invited to brief the president, while Bannon and the FBI were left behind. What a surprise considering who was running the country's COVID response at the time. Gain-of-function research exemplifies the hubris of the science. Bannon told the Journal on record that he and the FBI expected to have an opportunity to share with Biden what they'd found. Instead, they were the only agency that assessed that a laboratory origin was more likely, and the agency that expressed the highest level of confidence in its analysis of the source of the pandemic. We anticipated the FBI would be asked to attend the briefing, Bannon said. I find it surprising that the White House didn't ask. Of course they didn't ask, because they wanted to make sure that that was still going to go on. They needed to stop Donald Trump. Here we have a video that Rand Paul gave to the Washington Examiner in an exclusive interview that he plans to use his new leadership on a key Senate Security Committee to hold accountable Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Do you really think it's appropriate to use your $420,000 salary to attack scientists that disagree with you?
I think in usual fashion, Senator, you are distorting everything about me.
Did you ever object to Dr. Collins' characterization of them as fringe? Did you write back to Dr. Collins and say, no, they're not fringe, they're esteemed scientists, and it would be beneath me
I did not
do that? You responded to him that you would do it, and you immediately got an article in Wired, and you sent it back to him and said, hey, look, I've got him, I nailed him in Wired of all scientific publications.
That's not what went on. There you go again. You just do the same thing every hearing.
Here we have Fauci, fuck up Fauci, going and babbling away like he always does.
The framework and guidelines.
So what you're doing is defining away gain of function. No. You're simply saying it doesn't exist because you changed the definition on the NIH website.
That is true. They changed the definition on the website of what gain of function research means to cover their ass. They really did that.
This is terrible, and you're completely trying to escape the idea that we should do something about trying to prevent a pandemic from leaking from a lab. There's the preponderance of evidence now points towards this coming from the lab, and what you've done is change the definition on your website to try to cover your ass, basically.
Look at the look on the guy's face.
What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is not...
Get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth. You are the one. I'm not obfuscating the truth. You are the one.
You shaking?
I'm not obfuscating the truth. You are the one.
Here. Dr. Fauci's NIH-funded AIDS experiments on orphans. Yeah, this guy is murdered. This guy has possibly murdered close to 40 to 50 million people. This guy right here. That son of a bitch. Right there. That guy. A man of my people. Fauci. This guy's responsible for murdering up to 40 million people because he's a fucking idiot. Dr. Michael Savage said that his parents had a successful pharmacy that as soon as they retired and handed it to him, he drove it right into the ground. And then he, shortly afterwards, got a job in our government health departments.
The Administration for Children's Services had enrolled children in unnecessary and dangerous HIV and AIDS drugs trials during a 20-year period starting in the late 80s.
Anthony Fauci helped arrange for the drug companies to get access to children in foster homes and said,
poison, the milk is poison. There's poison in the water.
In the States.
There was a children's center in New York, in the Bronx, called Incarnation Center, where foster children or children who were considered to have AIDS through PCR tests that were inaccurate were put in this medical center, and they were used for experimental drugs.
Some of the children were infants. Some of the children were not even HIV positive. Fauci, together with pharmaceutical companies, sponsored these experiments. I use the terminology that's used in the Nuremberg Code. These are experiments, they're not studies. These are invasive experiments.
If the children wouldn't take the drugs by mouth, then they would put in a gastric tube.
Some of the older children refused to take the drugs that were given to them because they were so horrible. So they surgically inserted a feeding tube in their tummies so that they couldn't resist.
And many of these children died, a potter's grave of 80 children. And these were all children of color.
My assignment was to go there, so I did. I went to Hawthorne, New York, and I located this grave site. And what it looks like if you're standing before it, it was a semicircle of large tombstones with names engraved on the tombstones. I remember there were stuffed animals and flowers and hearts and things adorning those tombstones. And I also remember there were flies buzzing around. There was a mound, a gigantic hole in the ground covered by astroturf, and it wasn't nailed down, it was just covered. And I went over and I took a...
The fuck is this?
And I went over and I took a corner of the astroturf, and I remember...
Starlink, ladies and gentlemen.
Pounding. I lifted it up, and inside was just a lot of coffins. They were in there haphazardly. And apparently there was more than one child in each coffin.
The drug companies which have supported trials at Incarnation include some of the world's largest. They also refuse to be interviewed for this program. Officials at the National Institutes for Health insist that any participation of children in drug trials should be voluntary in every sense.
These little children are regarded as throwaway children. Nothing really was done to punish those who broke the law.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That son of a bitch murdered close to 40 or 50 million people. And after that, he still worked in our government up until the coronavirus pandemic. Reagan didn't get rid of him. Bush didn't get rid of him. Clinton didn't get rid of him. Bush 2 didn't get rid of him. Obama didn't get rid of him. Donald didn't get rid of him either. Then again, how could Donald know? How could we all have known what kind of a fucking monster this guy was? This Dr. Death, or this American Dr. Death. You know, you could say shit about Joseph Mengele all you want. This guy's just as fucking evil. So is Al Sharpton, for other reasons. This guy was in charge of the AIDS epidemic. He murdered so many millions of people. I hate you, PBS.
The best storytelling ever. Migration is freedom
in
Black America.
You know what? I am not waiting 27 seconds to watch your fucking advertisement. If I wanted to spend money on PBS and be a member, just send the damn link. I don't need a 30-second ad on why I should. But besides the point, Anthony Fauci murdered 40 to 50 million people. I'm going to say it. At least 10 million across the world for the coronavirus pandemic, and every single victim of the AIDS virus. All of these people need to see prison. Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, numero uno, that guy, and every single person who is involved with him and supported him, they have to see court. Because if you don't do it, then maybe it's time for the people will. All right? First, he killed 30 million people with AIDS, then another 10 to 20 million people across the world. How many more millions of people have to die before you decide to go ahead and start stepping on this guy's balls? That's my question to you. When is he going to go to prison? When are all of these criminals going to go to prison for what they did? But then again, I'm just a blue-collar working-class nobody. What the fuck would I know? Laugh and grow fat on your couches, people. Be pissed. fucking freaks. If you like what you hear, click like. That's right, like. It's right there. It's a fucking thumb. Go ahead. You know, it looks like a hand, just like what's on yours. You've got two of them. Take the one that operates the mouse or fucking on your little goddamn phone of yours. Go ahead and click it. It's right there. It's in the left fucking corner. Click it. Go ahead, click it. You just love to tap that fucking screen of yours. Go ahead. You know, you need to click that fucking thing. I am commanding you to click that fucking like button, you worthless, fat, pimple-faced piece of shit. I don't care if you have to go to the bathroom. You can do it while you're on the toilet. Click the like button. Subscribe. Get future updates. Update your notifications to ring so that you can go ahead and watch it as soon as it comes out, because that's what you want to do. That's what you need to do. You love it to fucking do that. So go ahead, click like, click subscribe. Go ahead, send your letters for advice to lettersatpurgatory@gmail.com. Go ahead and visit us on Rumble. You'll find us there on Rumble at the Purgatory Cycle. All one word, baby. You'll also find us on YouTube, but you'll probably end up having really highly edited videos because the fucking faggots at YouTube don't like this kind of content. But you do. You do. You love this kind of content. You can't stop watching this type of content. So go do it, you fucking morons.